All right, so we're going to get started this morning. And today we're taking AutoCAD and really talking about the export process. And it's even more than that, the scaled export and layout process. And I would argue that this is one of the most important things to get your head around in AutoCAD. And it's also one of those things that's kind of glossed over by a lot of the AutoCAD classes because they focus so much on learning to draw and not as much on what the output should look like. So we're going to spend some time today really talking about how do we get the output out of AutoCAD scaled, appropriately set up, and then ultimately we'll be taking that into Illustrator to do a little bit of collage work. That'll be next lecture, but we're going to walk you through that process this morning. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I'm going to get organized here for just a second. Excellent. And you can see that I've pulled up exercise 121. And in order to do 121, we're going to open up that drawing that we've been working on for the last 3 classes. So let me go ahead and minimize that for right now. I'm going to open up AutoCAD to start. Of course, we have a little bit of time while AutoCAD opens up here. All right. And so we've gotten AutoCAD open, and now I need to go ahead and open my work from last class. So I'm going to click on the little folder icon here to open, and I'll go into my OneDrive. And let's see, where are we? So this is a drawing that I've done. It's slightly different than the building that I was showing last class where I had the roof pitches. This has a flat roof on it. This was actually my original intent for what this building was going to look like. And I have cleaned up a few things. And one of the things that I did do for the plan view is I added a few extra contour lines. So I just approximated a few lines in between the main contour lines just to kind of enhance the view a little bit. I did trim out all the contour lines, so they're not inside the building right now. Other than that, it's very, very similar to what we had. I have the heavy, thick lines as my base. I have my line weights established. I have a little bit of siding on the building. And in this case, I don't really have any shadow. I didn't do shadows on this drawing, but we're getting the bulk of what we need set up. So first thing I'll do is I'm going to do a save as. So I'll click the little disk icon here to do a save as, and we will call this fall of 2022. And I'll go ahead and click on save. Perfect. And now one of the things that we need to talk about is how AutoCAD deals with scale. And so what AutoCAD does when it deals with scale is we draw everything full size. So if a wall is 6 inches, we draw it at 6 inches. If a room is 12 feet across, it's drawn at 12 feet across. So everything's set up as full scale. And when we're drawing in that full scale, we're seeing a black background, and this is what's called Modelspace. So if you look at the lower left corner of our AutoCAD window here, you see that the Model tab is active. And with that Model tab active, we're drawing everything in full scale. Next to it, you see that we have 2 tabs called Layout 1, Layout 2. You may or may not, you may have more tabs, you may have less tabs. I've already done Layout 1 so that I can show you what it's going to look like, and then we will create our own layout, and you can follow along with that part. So your Layout 1 probably won't look like my Layout 1. It'll probably be just a blank page. But when we flip from Modelspace into what's called Paperspace, we shift from having a full-scale model into having a sheet of paper. And that sheet of paper is represented by a white background rather than the black background that we had in our model space. Furthermore, you can see that I have the plans set up and scaled at a particular scale on this piece of paper. They're also reoriented. So where in Modelspace, I've drawn each of the elevations folded out from where my plan is. When we switch over into this Paperspace, I've reoriented everything so that they line up and are right side up, and I'm not looking at them upside down. So this is the direction that we're going, but how do we get there? So in order to do that, I'm going to create a brand new layout. And I'm doing this because you may have some preset layouts. It may say layout 1, layout 2, but I'm going to go ahead and create a brand new one so you see it from the very beginning. And I'll do that by clicking on the little plus sign here, and you'll see that layout 3 was created. If I click on layout 3, we see kind of this generic large piece of paper here, but we need to kind of specify a little bit more about this layout 3. Well, first off, if we were to double click on it, we can actually rename it. So I could say 24 by 36, for example, as my layout. And sometimes changing these labels can really help organize your drawing. Okay, so I've changed that to 24 by 36. You could leave it as layout 1, 2, or 3. It doesn't really matter. It's just for your own guidance. Next thing I need to do is I need to go ahead and right click on that tab. And you'll see that I have the ability to go into what's called the Page Setup Manager. And if I click Page Setup Manager, it will bring up the Page Setup Manager window. And you'll see that I have 24 by 36 listed. However, it's currently set up as a publish to web PNG. So we need to change a bunch of stuff about that. So with 24 by 36, my layout highlighted, I'm going to click on this Modify button. And when I click on the Modify button, this looks an awful lot like the printer window that we're used to seeing. So when we get to this printer window, we're presetting the printer settings, essentially. And that's what it's doing in the page setup. So I'm going to change the printer this time. We've worked previously with our publish to web JPEG and PNG before. And this time we're going to switch over into one of the PDF. And I've had great success for a long time with DWG to PDF. However, some of these other AutoCAD PDFs are equally good. So we could do an AutoCAD PDF high quality print. That would be fine. Or we could do DWG to PDF. Either one is fine. When we do that, it says the paper size is not found. Do you want a default paper size? Sure. But we're actually going to take that a step further because we want to change the paper size overall. So right here under paper size, I can change, and you can see these are all the standard paper sizes that are available. And we can actually scroll down here. What we're going to be using today is an ArcD size, which is 24 by 36. Now it's listed as 36 by 24. That's because it's listing the width first. So there it is at 36 by 24. When I choose that ArcD paper size, we can see it listed out right here. When we come down here under plot area, we want to choose to plot the entire layout. And when we get to our scale section here, we want to make sure that this sets at 1:1, because what we see on this page is what we want to print. We'll get to scaling the model in just a second, but for right now, we're going to make sure that that's set to 1:1. Under our plots pen style table, or our pen assignments, we're going to choose the AutoCAD CTB. This is actually a very interesting holdover from old school drawing. So when you see this, it says pen assignments here. Back when you were really, this is like in the 80s and early 90s, when people were doing large format prints and drawings, the printers that did it weren't like the printers of today that have just an ink cartridge that goes back and forth and prints the page. They actually had a little spiral of different pens that were in the page, and it would pick up a certain pen and draw on the page that particular line that you were working on. Then it would go back and leave the pen in its little carrier, pick up a different pen and draw it. So this is a holdover back to those days where you could actually assign specific pens to your plotter. So it's very old school, but it still exists in AutoCAD, and we have to choose the default AutoCAD CTB. Okay, so there are other specifics that are down here that you could use. The default is just fine, so we stick with that. It's possible that if you're using the AutoCAD architecture version, they have a different name. It's usually the first option, whatever it is. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and make sure that that's selected. Then we come up over here to quality. It's currently set to normal. We could go all the way up to maximum. It's not going to cause any slowdowns on these computers today. And the rest of our options are fine. Notice that there is a check mark for plot transparency. So if we wanted some transparency to plot, we could check that. I leave it unchecked because I don't have any transparency in my drawing. Plot Paperspace last. This one is also checked by default. And this is a good one because if you have anything in the, like on the paper that's not in a viewport, it'll print on top of everything else, which is good. Okay, so we have everything else set. I can go ahead and say, okay. And you'll see that my page size just changed. And there it is, right? So that new piece of paper is what I'm working with. I'm going to go ahead and close the layout or the page setup manager. And then this is my overall page. I'm surprised that the viewport disappeared on me, but it must have. So we'll have to create a new viewport. So this is fundamentally the page, the piece of paper that we're working with. Now we need to actually show our plan. So notice that when I'm in Paperspace and I look at my ribbon across the top, I have a tab, a new tab that's highlighted in blue for layout. And they're guessing that you need a, you're going to need to use the layout tab because you're working in Paperspace. So we can come over here and we're going to look at the create a view here. And let me just make sure that I have everything set up. This is a new layout. Yep. Let's do this layout viewport right here. So under this second section over, we have our layout already created. We're going to look at the layout viewports, and we're going to start with just a rectangular viewport. There are other options for viewports. We're going to pick a rectangular viewport, and we will then draw a viewport. And in this viewport that we just drew, we can double click to get inside it, and then we can zoom in. So it's like a live view of our model space drawing. So what I'll encourage you to do is zoom in on the floor plan like that. I could double click to get out of the view. So I'm double clicking outside. So double clicking inside gets us into the view. Double clicking outside gets us back into Paperspace. But this drawing is, yes, it's approximately the correct scale, but it's not actually the correct scale yet. And in order to really get this viewport to be correct, we need to look at the properties of this viewport. So if I type in properties, followed by enter, this properties window shows up. And this properties window will give us information about any object that we select. If I select the viewport, it'll give me specific information about the viewport. All of these options are fine for right now. However, down here, we want to look at our standard scale, and it's currently set at custom. If I click under standard scale and then I click on custom, you'll see that I have a whole set of scales that I can pick from. So for example, there's an 1/8 inch equals a foot, there's a 1/4 inch equals a foot, there's 3/16, etc. There are also, no, that's it. But we can work our way through it. So I'm suggesting for this layout that we use a scale of a 1/4 inch per foot. If your plan is particularly spread out or long, you may need to use 3/16 per foot, but I'm going to shoot for a 1/4 inch per foot. And if your building is sized appropriately, it should work. So now we can see that my building is actually being clipped. It's at a 1/4 inch per foot, but it's being clipped a little bit. So I can actually adjust the viewport size here to include my whole floor plan. I need a little bit more at the top here, like that. And then we'll go ahead and type move, and I'll move it over so that we're seeing the whole thing on the page. Maybe we want a little bit more space at the top, something like that. So this viewport is at a 1/4 inch per foot, and it's laid out on this 24 by 36 inch piece of paper. There are a couple issues that can happen with viewports, and I'd like to point these out now early so that you can be aware of these beforehand. If I were to zoom in on this viewport like this, and then I were to double click intentionally or accidentally, and I got inside this viewport and I wanted to do something, let's say I wanted to move this chair over a little bit, so I moved it over a little bit like that. When I go to zoom out, I'm still in the viewport and I'm never seeing the page anymore because I'm zooming in and out of the viewport. So I actually can get myself stuck. So I'm going to undo here to get out so I can see the paper. So to prohibit yourself from getting stuck accidentally or intentionally, I'm going to select the viewport and I'm going to come over here in the properties, and under display locked, once I set the scale, I'm going to go ahead and choose yes. After that's the case, when I double click to get inside and I zoom in and zoom out, it will never adjust the scale in the viewport. It's now fixed and part of the drawing. That being said, I also cannot, inside the viewport, type in pan and move the drawing. Where if this was unlocked, for example, display locked, no. If I came back in here and I went to pan, I can actually move the floor plan within the viewport. So I prefer, when I've got my viewport set and the scale is set, to go ahead and choose display locked. Yes. Recognize I can always unlock it if I needed it for some reason. So let's bring in our next view. So I'll come up here again into the layout ribbon and I'll choose the rectangular viewport. And I'll create another viewport. Like this. And so this is another view into my drawing. Sorry, I have to sneeze. And I couldn't find the mute button, so you had to listen to me. Sorry. I'm going to double click to get inside this viewport now. And I'm going to zoom in on my south elevation. So there's my south elevation. So once again on this, I need to adjust the scale. So I zoom in to get close. And then I need to take my drawing here, or excuse me, my viewport, and come over into my properties and go to my standard scale. And we're going to change that one to be 1/4 inch per foot, which then matches the floor plan. There it is. I could double click to get inside. I could do a little bit of panning to kind of center it in the view. There it is. Double click to get out. And then once again, I'm going to select it. And I'm going to lock the viewport. So display locked, I'm going to change to yes. Okay, hold on one second. I need to blow my nose. All right, much better. Sorry. I am getting better, but I still have the sneezes apparently this morning. Okay, so now I have this viewport here. It's time to get the 3 other views of our drawing. It's nice to use the south elevation directly below the floor plan because this starts to line up. And actually, we could line this up a little bit better. I could select the viewport, type move, and I can make sure that this corner, right, lines up with that corner right there. And actually, it looks like I was awfully close. So those guys line up. I could even take it as far as using an array from this corner straight down and making sure that those line up. Actually, they're off ever so slightly. So let's move that over. Oops. All right. There we go. And then I could delete that array after the fact. It's just nice when those things line up. So let's then create our next viewport. So I'll come over here into my rectangular viewport, and we'll create our next viewport. So you can see each time I'm just building a new rectangle. I'll double click to get inside and I'll zoom in. Now this one's a little bit challenging because suddenly we're on our side. So once I have the viewport and I'm kind of seeing my drawing, right, I can double click to get out and then I can just rotate this viewport. So I can type rotate. And I can rotate it. So it's like this, and suddenly that drawing is in its correct orientation. So we have to adjust the viewport size here a little bit. And then we need to pull that up a little bit. Then we'll go ahead and move this so that it's on the piece of paper. And there it is. Now, this still isn't at scale. So we'll double click to get inside. And we'll, excuse me. Just select it, don't double click it. And we'll change the scale under standard scale. We're going to change it to 1/4 inch per foot. And there it is. Then we can go ahead and come back to display locked and turn it to yes. And we may need to do a few adjustments. So we're getting the whole view there. And that looks pretty reasonable. Let's create our next viewport. So we'll come up to our layout ribbon. We'll click on rectangular again. You can see where I'm going with this. Go ahead and create another viewport. Double click to get inside. Zoom in. Now this building elevation is completely upside down. So we'll get close. And then we'll go ahead and take this and rotate it all the way around. So we'll rotate. I'm going to pick the center of this approximately there. And I'll go ahead and type 180. And that rotates it all the way around. Then we will select that viewport. And once again, in the properties over here, we will choose our standard scale to be 1/4 inch per foot. There it is. And we can adjust the viewport as necessary. We also will probably want to go to display locked and turn that to yes. We can make a few adjustments there. Now we're starting to see our whole drawing. We have one more elevation to go. So once again, I'll come over into my rectangular viewport. I'll create a new viewport there. We'll double click. I'm going to zoom in on that last elevation right there. I'll double click to get out. And then again, I have to rotate this. So we'll type rotate. And we want it to go straight up and down like that. And then we have to do some modifications on this one. So let's change the viewport here to make it wider. Make that wider. We can move it up just a little bit. So that's on the page. AutoCAD does give us these little dotted border lines. The idea behind those is that it's an approximate printer border. So if we were printing it, anything outside of that could get clipped on a printer. So they try to give us that general guide. So now I have all of my views laid out. They're all at their appropriate scale. Let's confirm that this one is. Nope, I didn't do this one yet. 1/4 inch per foot. Display locked. Yes. There we go. So now I have all of my views established on the page. So if at this point I went to print it, we'd still have some issues, but let's try that and see. I'm going to click the printer icon. And all of these are preset. We already did this because we did them in the page setup manager. So all we have to do is say, okay, and choose where we want it to be saved. So let me go into my folder for today. And let's see here. We'll go ahead and save this. Perfect. And when you see it, it looks a lot like what the Paperspace looks like, though the line weights should be correct on this drawing. But we've got some issues. One, we're seeing every one of the viewport rectangles. Two, we're seeing these topo lines run through our various elevations. So we need to fix that problem. So let's come back here. First off, if we don't want the borders of all of these viewports to print, we need to put them on a non-printing layer. So we can go back to our home ribbon and we can look at our layers here. Let's go to layer properties. And we have our guides layer, that's a non-printing layer, but I actually like to create a separate Paperspace layer. And this is, again, this is my own personal practice, but I'm showing it to you just so that you can see me do it. Alana, you said, should we be including those contour lines? We should not include the contour lines in the elevation, but you do want to show contour lines in your floor plan. You don't have to add the contour lines like I did. It just, to me, it looked better to have a few more contour lines in there. But again, it's up to you. If you don't want to show any contour lines, that's also okay. So I'm back in my layer properties manager here. And I'm going to create that layer that would be my Paperspace layer. And what I do to designate a Paperspace layer is I put a Z in front of it. So you saw that I previously used like A-walls for the walls, etc. For Paperspace, I put a Z in front of it. That's just my own personal convention, but I'm going to do it here as an example. So I'm going to say Z followed by no print. Pretty obvious what I mean. I'm also going to change the color of that layer. See, where did my Z no print layer go? What? It froze on me. Let me hit cancel here. All right. So nice when it didn't create it. Okay, let me try that one more time. Z dash no print. There it is. Don't know why it was having issues. I'll make it a non-printing layer, and I'm going to make it green so I can see it easily. Oh, there it is. Go figure. Do I really have two? Wow. Okay, now I have one Z no print layer. I'm going to go ahead and select all of the viewports like that. And I'm going to right click, or excuse me, I'm in Rhino today. I'm going to go ahead and come up here and we're going to choose what? Close the layer properties. Why is this being so difficult? Not listed. All right, hold on. We got to sort this out. I don't know what's going on here. Try it one more time. There it is. I don't know what happened, but I was having issues there. So let's take all of these viewports and I'm going to change them onto that Z no print layer. Now, all that does is it makes the border of the viewport go away. So if I were to print this again, and we'll go ahead and save it and overwrite it. Yes. There it is. You can see that those borders went away. The lines themselves didn't go away. They're still there, but the borders went away. And that's what we wanted. The next piece of this would be to take these viewports where the diagonal contour line is showing up and to turn it off. So if I double click to get inside this south elevation here, and I come up into my layers here, and we come down into our topography, notice that we have an on and off, but if I were to turn the layer off, it would turn off everywhere. I don't want it to turn off in this viewport. Instead, I want it to only turn off in my elevation view. And I can do that by clicking the third icon over, which is freeze or thaw in current viewport. So if I click on that, it'll turn it off in this viewport only. We can move over into this view and once again, go up here and turn off my topography there. We can go into this view and turn off my topography here. And finally, in the last view, we can come in and turn off my topography here as well. So now if I were to print it, I'll go ahead and click on the printer icon here. I'll say, okay. We'll say save. All of those topo lines that were running through my building have gone away. See, I'm fine-tuning this to make it a little bit better. Now I have a few, as I start to look at this, I'm starting to notice other issues that I may want to resolve. One of which is that my swing lines and my doors are all phantom lines. So that's something I want to change. Let me go into my layer properties and let's look at that doors layer. So let's see, where do I have it? Doors. It's currently set as a phantom line. So let's go ahead and switch that into a continuous line. And that'll solve that problem. Looks like my doors don't have their proper line weights assigned to them either. We can confirm that my walls have their correct thickness. Yep, all the rest of this seems okay right now. What's this? Right, all of that looks okay. And then we can go ahead and print it again. So I'll go back to print. We'll say okay, and we'll go ahead and save. Yes. And there it is. And so you can start to see this come together. Now, once I see this, and you see that I keep printing it over and over again, and I do that on purpose because I want to see it in its final state. So one of the things that I notice is that this elevation and this elevation don't really line up. They seem awkward. So I'm going to move either this down or this one up to kind of align them a little bit. So I'll come over here and let's go ahead. Let's take these two right now. Let's move so that this approximately lines up over here. That feels a little bit better. Let's move this one down just a little bit more. Like that. I might also take this one and move it over. Now, obviously, these don't match up because they're different elevations, but kind of keeping them generally in a line can really help these look a little bit better. So let's move this over a little bit more like that. And then let's move this one up. So it's a little bit higher. Oops. Let's move this over. So I'm just kind of tweaking the layout just a little bit. Let's move this one up a little bit more. And then we'll go ahead and come back and print it again. So I'll click the printer icon and say, okay. Then we'll click save. Yes. And there it is. Now these look a little bit better. They're more evenly spaced. These two are starting to line up. Yeah, this feels a lot better. We can see that my phantom lines were fixed. Everything looks okay. So at this point, I'm ready to move on. And what we're going to do is and I'll talk about this next class, is we're going to take this into Illustrator and do collage work and text and stuff in Illustrator. However, this is also the point where you could add titles in AutoCAD. You could add dimensions in AutoCAD. Those are all topics that we're not covering in this class. But this in Paperspace right here, this would be where you would add that kind of information. So if, for example, you were adding dimensions in, you would create a layer. I call it Z-dims for dimensions. And I would go ahead and put my dimensions on right here in Paperspace. Okay, so that's kind of the point of why we get to this place where this is the piece of paper, this is the final layout. The beautiful thing is we can at any time go back into Modelspace and keep working on our model. We could change something, we could move something, we could say, you know what, that line isn't supposed to be there. Let me go in and trim it, and I could trim that line out, for example. Or I could adjust the line weight. There's a missing line weight. So that should be on the walls layer, and instead it's on the windows layer. So let's go ahead and change that to be on the walls layer. So when I do those changes, when I make those changes, I can then jump back into my layout, and that change reflects in the layout. So they're meant to work together. So we can still model in Modelspace, but then this is where the layout starts to happen. I have a little bit of an odd kind of tiny piece of topography right there. I think I might get rid of that just from a look standpoint. Let's go ahead and pull this up a little bit higher and get that to cut off a little bit sooner. It just feels a little bit better. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save it now. This is my AutoCAD file. Make sure the AutoCAD file is saved. Then I'll go to the print icon and I'll click on the printer. Oops, there we go. I'll go ahead and say okay. And again, each time I'm creating this, I'm creating a PDF. And there it is, and it previews that PDF. In order to turn it in so that we can easily see it, I'd like to move from a PDF into a JPEG. But again, the PDF is kind of that universal format. You'll be using that most commonly going forward. So let's take a look at that PDF. And what I'll do is I'll go ahead and open that PDF natively in Illustrator. So let me minimize AutoCAD for a second. And this is where we're going next class, and I'll spend all day working on it in the next lecture. But let's go ahead and open Illustrator, and we'll do our final export from Illustrator right now. So we'll wait for Illustrator to open up here. There we go. And one of the great things about Illustrator is it can natively open a PDF file. So let's go to File and then Open. So I'm not going to import or anything. I'm just going to File and then Open. Let me go into my OneDrive. And I'm going to go into that folder for today. Maybe. Hello. Froze on me, sorry. There we go. And I have to find it. There we go. There's my layout for today, and we'll go ahead and open it. And Illustrator will open it. If I press Control-0, we'll see the whole page. There it is. And we can kind of see the line weights maybe a little bit better in here. Sometimes some of the line weights disappear. Don't worry, when you go to actually do the export, they'll show back in. Or if I zoom in, they'll come back. It's just the preview of it. So if I press Control+, and then let me hold down spacebar, we can come over here, and you can see there it is. It came back. Okay. So once I have all of this in Illustrator, I can go straight up to File and then Export, and we'll export as, and we'll make a JPEG out of this. So let's go up to a JPEG, and we're still in the same folder here, and we'll go ahead and click on Export. We can choose our maximum size and a resolution up at 300, and we'll go ahead and say OK. And that then gives us a JPEG image of our PDF. So that's the entire workflow, right? Where we're going in, and that JPEG is what I'll end up posting on Canvas as part of your exercise. All of this, of course, is written out. It'll kind of walk you through the process here. I did also include the plan line weight guide and the line weight guide for elevations. So you can go back and reference those to get these fine-tuned. My goal today at the end of exercise 121, is that you should pretty much have your building put together. You should have all 4 elevations, and you should be able to get them laid out on the page. We will then take that layout next class into Illustrator, do a little bit more collage work, talk about text and leaders and little notes and drawing notes and that sort of thing, in terms of kind of finalizing this. So you're getting really close to having your assignment 105 done, and it's kind of following along. And that's a good thing, because we're at the end of this, toward the end of the semester, and we've got not too much time left. So working in class and using that for your assignment all at once is a good plan. The other thing that I'll throw out there, and I'm going to continue to remind you guys of this, is that that portfolio is going to start hanging over your head really soon. We are November 9th right now. December 5th, so a little bit less than a month away, is the end of class. And we want to make sure that your portfolio is done and really, really good by that point. So you should, with any extra time you have, start putting the other pieces into your portfolio. You've now completed your lecture series poster. You've completed your Charlie Harper. So there's 2 more assignments that can go into your portfolio. And you're getting really close on this assignment 105. So we're really moving that direction. Okay, so I know I'm actually done a little bit early today. That gives you a little bit of extra time to catch up as well. So I'm going to go ahead and turn you guys loose. I will be here the rest of the morning. So if you guys have any questions, please pop in, make sure that you're understanding what it is that we're trying to do. And then, of course, if you haven't already done your official check-in for this week, make sure you're coming at some point between now and 10:50 to get your check-in for this week. All right. So with that, I'll let you guys go. Have a great weekend. I know it's only Wednesday, but have a good weekend, and I'll see you next week.